It's 5 o'clock. It's time to get started while planning the zone meeting for tonight. First of all, we'll have pledge to the allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're ready for our work session.
All right, good
Item
evening.
number 3.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. This, Elena Helton, City Planner. So tonight, we're going to have the next installment of our Planning and Zoning Educational Series. We've covered a couple different topics so far. The next discussion item is downtown revitalization. So I've invited Jessica Sowell here to give you guys a presentation. Jessica Sowell is the Assistant Director of Community Services. She also acts as our Main Street Manager and has been the Historic Sites Manager for several years. She's been with the city over 14 years, actually. And she's managing the Downtown Master Plan update process. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jessica, and she's going to talk to you about some general downtown revitalization strategies and specifically what we're doing in our downtown. So with that, I'll pass it off to Ms. Jessica Sowell.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I was joking with Elena that she matches my presentation today. She color coordinated and everything. Like Elena said, I'm Jessica Sowell. I'm the Community Services Assistant Director. I'm excited to be here to talk to y'all this afternoon about Main Street and downtown revitalization. Now that term means something different to everybody. So rather than go into a ton of technical planning terms, I decided to kind of go with what we're currently doing in Nacogdoches. Ideally, for downtown revitalization, you would have a big overarching plan. Nacogdoches doesn't necessarily have one of those as far as for our downtown area. See if this thing's on. That works better. So I wanted to kind of go over some of the previous plans that we have with y'all. We have a 1974 downtown master plan that is technically still valid. It's just not really used. You can tell it's from 1974. It's a little dated. When it was done, it was actually pretty cutting edge. There was a lot of outreach. We had a committee. We had a planning organization, consultants that helped us with this plan. The big suggestion was convert Main Street into kind of a pedestrian shopping area. So to cut off all through traffic, add things like benches and landscaping and water features and really kind of make it more of a shopping area. It's pretty progressive for the time because we were all about cars and driving everywhere and kind of planning for that type of traffic. So this was really pretty cutting edge. I don't know why some of these things weren't followed through with. My guess is TxDOT said you're not going to shut down our highway because that would cause a lot of diversion around there. So some of those big suggestions were not carried forward, but other things like additional benches and landscaping, trying to build kind of for people those suggestions were taken and put into effect. We also have a 1998 Heritage Development Plan that was done by Texas A&M. This is not a plan specifically for downtown, but it does cover some downtown elements. One of the big suggestions was that the city should buy the railroad depot and use it for tourism, and that's exactly what we did. We bought the railroad depot, we use it as a historic site. There was a few other things in here like adding murals so you can tell where downtown starts, so we've done some of that. But again, this wasn't a plan specifically for downtown, it just had a few downtown elements in it. Also, there was no community input on this, it was just done by grad students in coordination with some staff and a few other groups that were highly involved in doing this. It was kind of more of an environmental plan than anything. And then we also have a 2017 Main Street Streetscape Plan, which is extremely hard to say. And that focuses on walkability, sidewalk improvements, kind of creating those third event spaces. And that plan was done by Texas Historic Commission at the request of downtown Nacogdoches and our Main Street Department. Again, it's a great plan. There's not a lot of community input to it. It was focused on more walkability, sidewalk improvement, things like that. Also, our Main Street Board does do an annual transformation strategy plan. That's been more event focused and small project focused and kind of what can we do to improve in small incremental ways that will eventually make a big difference. Again, that's kind of with our Main Street Board and some of our committees, their input, but not, this huge overarching plan that we ask a lot of community input on. So while we don't have a ton of plans to go off of, we have a lot of people. They're very, very passionate about downtown Nacogdoches. They're very passionate about Main Street, and they're definitely our partners in all these projects we do. We have a Main Street Advisory Board that's appointed by City Council. We have 11 members. 7 are brand new members who have a lot of excitement. They want to do all these new projects, so they're very excited about that. They have a monthly meeting, plus they meet outside of our regular stated board meetings in their committees. We have 4 committees: promotions, organization, economic vitality, and design. And these committees kind of look at some of the smaller projects, works out all the nuts and bolts of it, and then take it to our Main Street Advisory Board. We also have our Downtown Master Plan Steering Committee of 19 members made up of the community, and their main goal is to do the Downtown Master Plan. These are just 2 of our major stakeholders. We also have partners with the Chamber, the CVB, our downtown business owners, NEDCO, and then a few other corporate partners that help fund some of the things we've done downtown. So we're really excited to have all these partners to help us get some of these things done, so it's not just me and my Main Street assistant trying to row this boat alone. So the things we have done, in spite of not having an overarching downtown plan, we've made these small incremental improvements to downtown, things that would improve, how you work downtown, how you live downtown, how tourists see downtown. One of my favorite things is our Main Street planter boxes and hanging baskets. That was done with partially with a grant from the Bright Foundation. Also, there's 3 or 4 garden clubs that support this project. And then thankfully, excuse me, our Parks Department maintains all of these. Because putting the baskets up and having the planters is great, but if there's no one to water them and replace plants, everything dies. So we have that project going on. It may seem like something small, but when tourists come through town, that's one of the things we hear about the most, is it's beautiful and everything's green, and these planter boxes are literally overflowing with flowers. That's made a big difference. We also have murals, which not only are they pretty and bright and eye-catching, they kind of serve this dual purpose to where they're beautiful and eye-catching and bright, and they bring that art to downtown, but they're also in vacant building windows. So rather than staring into a vacant building that may be used for storage or is completely empty, excuse me, now you're looking at a piece of art. We believe it kind of helps bring some notice to some of these empty buildings, which is good and bad. We want people to fill them up, so hopefully they notice those buildings, but also they're noticing them for better reasons. Some things that may seem kind of small, but our downtown business owners really appreciate them, is our directional signage. We have some signs that point people off of Main Street, because downtown is not just East Main. It's Church Street, it's Mound Street, it's Commerce Alley. So we want to point people off the main drag and get them to go down to the stores that are just a little off the beaten path. Really, it's 1 block. And sometimes people just don't park their car and go walk around. They're just driving down East Main. If that's all they see, that's all they see. So we've put these signs up. They will be updated probably in the next 6 months. We've had a lot of business turnover, which is good. Some people have retired and moved on. We have a lot of new great businesses in town. So these will be updated soon. Also, we've taken some empty store windows at Monograms on Main. It used to be an old movie theater, so they have these big movie theater poster windows, which for years were vacant, and just big empty windows, which didn't look the greatest. I know the building owner didn't like it either. So now we've kind of made selfie spots, and then we also put community calendars in there as well. So it helps the business owner and makes it look a little better downtown. And it's kind of eye-catching. You think, oh, it's an old movie poster, and then you're like, oh, actually it's a calendar of events. So that's been a big hit. Another initiative we recently did with several departments was the Main Street Clean Sweep. We asked downtown business owners, residents, people that visit downtown what they saw that they thought we needed to fix. Granted, a lot of them said all these sidewalks need to be fixed, and that's not something we can necessarily do in a cleaning event. But we did make note of it and kind of pass those on to our parks or our public works department. But this was more cleaning sidewalks, trimming trees, trimming bushes, taking out Christmas lights that are no longer working, and making a big push just in a 2-week time span to give downtown a lot of TLC. We hope to make this an annual event. It's the first time really all of these city departments have worked together at the exact same time in one area, kind of in multiple different facets. So that was really, really fun project to be a part of, and I think the community really appreciated it. We have a few upcoming initiatives and collaborations. One of them is the Main Street Board is working on a Main Street beautification grant. These would be small grants given to downtown building owners or business owners that are wanting to do some small scale projects, like do a new, excuse me, a new sign for their business, maybe painting some outside, doing some landscaping, things of that nature. And so these are a little bit easier to get. You know, they're not huge, like $50,000 grants, so you have to jump through a ton of hoops. These are just something that can help businesses in a pretty short term. We hope that people use this hand in hand with the historic restoration grants that the HLPC committee gives out. Those are big scale grants that help you replace your roof, help you redo the entire front facade, so maybe they can do both of these at the same time. We're also working with the Historic Landmark Preservation Committee, Code Enforcement, and the Historic Preservation Officer to work on the demolition by neglect ordinance. It's an ordinance that's been on the books for a very long time, and we're just kind of starting to use it again with help from the administration and city council and the approval of using this tool. Demolition by neglect is actually a preservation ordinance. It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like we're tearing down buildings. But what we're doing is intervening early so people that own these historic buildings don't let them get to the point where demolition is the only option. It applies to any of the historic districts, but I'm helping do that in the downtown area to make sure if you have a historic building, you keep it in a good shape because it's part of our Nacogdoches history. And it doesn't look great if you have all these buildings that are falling apart and, you know, tourists don't like that, people who live downtown don't like that, and it's bad for preservation. And our next big event that is going to take up a lot of my time is going to be our Texas Downtown Association Conference. That'll be in the fall of 2023. We'll be welcoming 250 to 300 attendees from all over the state. And these are people like other Main Street managers, Chamber of Commerce employees, investors, event organizers, and they'll all be coming to Nacogdoches to see our beautiful downtown. We'll have all sorts of sessions, evening events, lunch presentations. So it's really our chance to show off downtown. We're excited about this because it's our chance to work with other main streets and kind of see what's working there, but also it's a chance to show off to people that might want to invest in Nacogdoches, might want to, you know, start a business here, move a business here, rehabilitate a building and then sell it. So we could have some really great contacts out of that event. So we're all very excited about it. And then, of course, over on your right side is a whole list of committee projects that our committees have said, we want to start working on these things. I'm most excited about looking at a vacant building ordinance, try to get some of our empty buildings that have been empty for years, try to get them filled, looking at additional directional signage, maybe eventually working on a cultural district designation. We've applied for one in the past that got denied, said our application needed a little work. So I think hand in hand with the downtown master plan, doing that cultural district designation could really help kind of put us on the map. Of course, the thing that takes up the vast majority of my time these days is our downtown master planning process. Currently, our committee is working with DTJ, who's our consultant. We have all of our committee up to speed, kind of what downtown planning is, a lot of the things I've told y'all today, like what plans we've had, what downtown really is. So we kind of got them up to speed, and now we're working with DTJ to start on our outreach efforts. They'll be doing things like a meeting in a box, where you can go to your Sunday school, your book club, your gym, if you have a special gym you go to and they have a certain class, and you can go get feedback from these people on what do you think about downtown revitalization, or what do you think about planning and zoning or economic development, and you can ask those questions to them and then walk through it with your group so we can get that from them. There'll also be online surveys, event outreach, focus groups, interviews, just a ton of stuff. And we hope at the end of this, we end up with a large-scale downtown master plan that covers things like parking, traffic, historic restoration, getting these vacant buildings opened, creating event spaces, and also looking at, things like the utilities and sidewalks that support all of those great things. So that's kind of our big project we're working on. And then our Main Street board is going to pattern all of their activities over those suggestions. So I know that's a lot of information. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have, or if there's suggestions that you've seen in other cities that you think work for Main Street that could work here, I'm happy to hear those as well.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Jessica. I wanted to say that all the efforts that you guys have done a tremendous job. It looks great. The planter boxes are fantastic. They add an element of whimsy to the city, and I know that a lot of people appreciate all the efforts you guys have made for it.
Well, thank you.
So, thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other commissioner have any questions?
All right. Thank you all
Jessica.
very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next agenda item is another workshop item. It's just a continuation of the policy discussion regarding zone change applications, neighborhood meetings, and planning and zoning commission meetings. So at our last meeting, we presented a couple different initiatives for increasing neighborhood participation in our zone change process, and while still accommodating our customer service levels as far as processing of zone change and development applications in general. And so we have moved forward with those initiatives, including requiring neighborhood meetings prior to application for certain zone change applications. And as a reminder, that was for any kind of zone change from single family to multifamily or commercial, a zone change request that skipped two or more zoning district categories, so going from R1 to R3 or R2 to R4. And also the creation of new planned development districts. And so we actually had our first neighborhood meeting last week, and it was really successful, and we got some good input from the neighborhood, and so we're excited to continue to do that, and you're actually going to see that item come forward in a zone change request later this month, so you'll have a second meeting in May. Also, we did get some feedback from City Council on some of those initiatives, including just being a little bit more descriptive in the language in our postcards. There was some confusion with the last meeting about were these meetings public or not, and they are. So just providing clarification on that. But other than that, we got some really good response from City Council. And so they were really glad to see the work that we were doing and being proactive and trying to increase that neighborhood participation in our process. So that's all I have for that item. We can open it up for public or for open forum before we move on to the consent agenda, Chairman. Unless you guys have any questions about that, so the changes that we've made or the neighborhood meeting or anything like that.
Quite a few people that showed up.
Yeah, that area in particular is primarily rental property. And so of the homeowners in that area, the majority of those did attend the meeting, but that was only a few people because the majority is rental property. But the people that did attend were those living adjacent to the property, so those were the highest impact.
Who were the city members that actually showed up?
Ken Depish, our Planning and Zoning Commission Chair, did attend the meeting. He just wanted to view and kind of see how things went, and I got some positive feedback from Ken as well. And Ken came to the City Council meeting to talk to City Council about how the meeting went. And so I think it was good. I think in the future, we welcome that attendance. We go ahead and do a public notice just in case we do get a quorum. The idea is it is primarily neighborhood people, but we know that there's always some interest from the commission and council, so we do advertise for it just in case we do have a quorum. But in general, we don't anticipate a lot of attendance from commissioners and council in the future unless it's a really large area or something specific. So
I'd like to attend. I was out of town.
Yeah,
but I'd
absolutely.
like to attend one of them.
yeah, so we'll let you guys know ahead of time when we have those meetings. We'll give you more notice than we did last time, but we'll let you know ahead of time so you have the opportunity to make arrangements for those. They'll always be on a Wednesday or Thursday afternoon. They'll always be at 5 or 5:30 at a city facility of some sort, unless there's some other arrangement made. So
Elena, what was the format? How was the structure of it all? And,
So if you've ever been to one of the public forums at the Recreation Center, at the Recreation Center, there's a large meeting room that we use for our comprehensive plan committee meetings. We've used them to have a couple other public forums. And essentially, there's a large projector. We have a map of the property, and then we have like 10 rows of chairs. Whenever you come in, there's a sign-in sheet. There's copies of maps of the property. We also have copies of information packets that talk about our zone change process. And we also have note cards. So if you don't feel comfortable asking a question in public, or if you don't feel comfortable just making a comment, you can write that down, and then we can get back to you or just provide that information. And then we also save all of that as a public record. So that way, if the applicant does move forward with the application, we have all that already to go.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do you believe it was positive in terms of the communication between the applicant or the future applicant and the members of the community?
I do, because it was a good opportunity for the applicant to stand up in front of the neighbors, explain in detail what it is they're wanting to do, get those direct questions and direct feedback, and have that open dialogue in a more neutral setting. And so I thought it was a very productive process, and just allowed for some of those general concerns to be aired out ahead of time, clear some confusion. So yeah, I feel like these are going to be very productive.
Thank you. It's great.
I thought they would be because, you know, we have lots of discussion here at the commission that could be taken care of at those community meetings. And kind of air some of those things out,
Yeah.
and it'd be settled when it get here to the commission.
Yeah, and just for clarification, so there's some zone changes on tonight's agenda that we didn't have neighborhood meetings for because they didn't meet that criteria.
Okay.
But just because either they were going, for whatever reason, there's a specific criteria. So we didn't have neighborhood meetings for those, but we anticipate that we're just gonna have more and more. And we do recommend, even if they're not required to, hey, we're doing this new neighborhood meeting, you might benefit from that. So we do let people know that that we host them and we'll provide them, and we'll do that as a courtesy, so we do offer it, but we don't require it. So,
Did we look into anything for alternative signage for cost-effective measures to let them know that there's gonna be a little public hearing for that?
we did initially, the conversation that we had with a city manager's office and city council was that this is kind of a new process, and we know there's gonna be some trial and error. So we wanted to kind of take the time to do this initial plan, or do this initial meeting, look at the response that we got, look at the attendance that we got, and then go from there. And I think doing that, getting that feedback from the neighborhood, it will help us tweak and fine tune and improve the process. And so we did look at those signage, but looking at the amount of staff workload, it would be a really administrative burden for that. And so if we find that we're not getting participation, we're not getting attendance, I think then we can look at
Okay.
adding those additional items, and maybe pivoting that cost to the applicant.
Okay.
But for now, I think that initial meeting went really well. We got responses from the people that we really intended to, and I think we'll just give us a little grace and see how things go, and then if we need to add additional measures, we would like to do that in the future.
Sure. Thank you. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Are we ready for the open forum?
We are, and I think, I know we have at least one person in attendance who wanted to address the commission,
give
so
us-
I will.
Could you kind of give them some instructions on the open forum?
Oh, yes, so in addition to public comment on agenda items that are posted, the commission can take general comments from the public regarding anything that's not on the agenda for tonight. So tonight, we have a couple different zone changes that are on the agenda. There will be a public hearing portion for each item where the public will have the opportunity to address the commission directly. This is for items not listed on the agenda for this evening. And so the commission can't interact directly with the public. We can take their comments, thank them for their time, but we can't discuss anything that's not identified on tonight's agenda. And we ask that each public speaker don't use any more than 3 minutes per speaker. I think that's it.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Elena. We have anyone coming, who will speak on the public forum?
Chair Mills, Commission, I don't care how many times you come up here, it's always makes you nervous, and I'm nervous now. So I'd like to take this opportunity just to kind of talk about, some general idea, or one particular general idea. Mr. Conklin, at our last meeting, you said something about how you thought people shouldn't, I'm going to paraphrase if you allow me, that we shouldn't be telling people what they could do with the property except for a few exceptions. And that's a really understandable perspective to take. But I would suggest that maybe the opposite is true, is that not that we should be telling people what to do everywhere, but as we realize that there's so many things that we have because of what we say we can and can't do. For instance, we can't tear down a historic building in Nacogdoches. We're going to have to build a single-family subdivision. The lot has to be this big. There's many, many things that we tell. And I like to think in analogies, and I believe you're a pilot, and I know Ms. Fu is a pilot too. I mean, think how ridiculous it would be if we were going to say about an airport, well, we're just going to let people go fly ultralights around and, look at the airplanes. I mean, we have to, as a society, decide what are the things that we value as a community good, and how can we regulate those? And then how can we compare those to the individual rights to use their property as they want? And I would just mention a couple that are important to me. One would be tree protection. As we go, sometimes I drive around and I see these sites that are totally clear cut, or I see somebody goes into a piece of property and what they do is, instead of, like, if you take an example up on North Street where they built the thrift shop, there was a magnolia tree that was just, it was 150 years old. It was gorgeous. And they just cut it down. Now, did they have to do that? No. Would it have required a little bit of extra work to save that tree? Yes, it would have. I mean, they would have had to build a retaining wall. They might have lost a few parking spots, but they hardly ever use those parking spots. So I would encourage y'all, especially since you are, you know, in charge of land use control and rules and regulations, that you reflect that these regulations we have are not intended just to make people's lives miserable, but to make our community better, more beautiful, more environmentally sensitive. And then if everybody follows the rules 50, 100 years down from now, people are going to be thankful for that. And so I don't want to say that what you said is wrong. I just ask you for y'all to reconsider that. Thank you.
And your name was who?
Matt Moore, 216 North Church Street.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, anyone else would like to speak in an open forum? If not, thank you. We're moving on to our consent agenda.
All right, Elena Helton, City Planner. So on the agenda, you have the approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from April 11th, 2022. A copy of those minutes were provided in your packet, and there's one at your place. Does the commission have any corrections or additions they'd like to make to the minutes at this time?
I didn't see it.
No? Okay.
Nope, no changes from me.
I didn't see it.
Chairman, would you like to call for a motion for approval of the minutes?
Can we get someone to give a motion for the approval of our minutes on April?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
It's been moved and second that we approve our minutes for the April P and Z meeting. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, and so order.
All right, item 6A is consideration and discussion of action of items that were removed from the consent agenda, and none were. So Commissioner Mills, I think we can move on to item 6B.
We move to item 6B, public hearing for consider approval of specific use permit for an accessory apartment for Lot 3, City Block 4, located on 504 North Mound Street. This request was submitted by Michael and Marianne Elliott Keller, case file SUP 2022-02.
All right, thank you. Elena Helton, City Planner. As stated, this request is a specific use permit for an accessory apartment. The property is approximately 1.3 acres located on North Mound Street. The zoning ordinance does allow for a specific use permit process for certain uses that aren't otherwise normally allowed in a zoning district, to allow staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council to review and make any conditions, if necessary, on such development so as not to adversely impact the surrounding area. So again, this is an existing residential home zoned and developed as single family at 504 North Mound Street. The surrounding zoning is also single family, but also a mix of other zoning districts. So you have B2, which is commercial, that's that purple color you see. R4 to the east, that's multifamily. But essentially the area is largely developed with large historical single-family homes. There is a historical elementary school right across the street. So that's that large parcel that you see to the west. And this property is also located in a historic district. And so this property, along with the others along Mound Street, are located in the Washington Historic District. And so this historic district designation doesn't change the underlying zoning or any of the uses that are permitted. It essentially adds another layer of review for any improvements that are made to the property in regards to style and design and architecture and so on and so forth. So any improvements to property within these districts do have to seek approval from the Historic Landmark and Preservation Committee. And so this item was presented to the HLPC on April 4th, and they did recommend approval. And we'll look at some renderings of the drawing as well. So the HLPC, they're not reviewing or approving the land use, they're reviewing the design, layout, and the exterior improvements. And that did receive approval on April 4th. And so, looking at the future land use is single-family residential. This specific use permit will not change the underlying zoning of the property or any of the uses that are permitted, so the property will remain single-family. There won't be any other uses allowed except for single-family, and so the request is in line with the future land use designation because it doesn't change the underlying zoning district. This is an image of the site plan provided by the applicant. And so the image on the left of your screen, that's the existing home, and we'll look at some photos of that in just a minute. Behind the home, there's an existing garage, and there's a small lean-to where they're using that as some storage for the home. So essentially, they're proposing an addition to that existing structure for a small accessory apartment. The apartment itself is going to be about 750 square feet, which does meet the threshold for accessory apartments. So the zoning ordinance states that you can have an accessory apartment if it's not 30% or more of the main living area, and this does meet that requirement. There won't be any separate utility connections, and the home can't be occupied by anyone other than family members of the second degree or a staff that work on the property and serve the home. So think of like a nanny or caretaker or something of that sort. This is just a floor plan showing you the existing carport on the left, that open covered storage, and then the proposed addition. So this is going to be a one-bedroom apartment with full kitchen, living area, bathroom, and then a small outdoor porch. These are some images of that existing carport. So you see there's a two-car garage, and then right beside it there's that lean-to with the lattice fence, and all of that is going to remain. This is a rendering showing you what the after will look like. So on the left, again, you have the carport garage, and then the lean-to with the roof connection to the new accessory apartment. And this is just a side view showing what the proposed improvements will look like. And all this will be behind the main structure. So from the street, you won't be able to see any of this. It'll be totally blocked from view. And there's also a 6-foot privacy fence going around the property. These are images of the home from North Mound Street. And so this is going to be the same street view that you see whenever you're driving down North Mound, even with the addition in the back. These are some other photos of other homes in the area. Like I said, all of the other homes on North Mound, they are in that historic designation. So these are all older, larger estate homes that do have some significant historical architecture. These are just some additional images to give you an idea of the character of the area. And this is an image of the elementary school and museum across the street. And so we did send 12 written letters to property owners within the 200-foot buffer. In the packet, in the staff report, whenever we published this online, we had received 2 written letters in support. We actually received a 3rd written letter in support, and we included it in your packet from the adjacent neighbors. And so we received a few questions, but we didn't receive any opposition to the request. Again, the applicant is in attendance. If the commission should have any questions, we'll have a public hearing portion in just a minute. And staff does find that the request does meet the criteria for approval found in the zoning ordinance regarding compatibility, orderly growth and development, site design standards like parking, lighting, and landscaping, and it's in compliance with the comprehensive plan. And so with that, I'll conclude my presentation, open it up for questions from the commission, or we can ask the applicant if they'd like to have any statements for the commission as well, if you have any questions of them.
Any question, Eli?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Beautiful place.
I believe he's probably the only home in that section that doesn't have a current garage apartment. I know most of the rest of them do, so.
And that's a great point. There's actually several homes that do have garage apartments because that was just something that was common during that era of construction. And so this isn't going to be anything that's substantially different from similarly situated homes in the area. With the did you want to make any comments? No? All right. All right.
No, sir.
I'll step aside, Commissioner, if you want to open it up for questions or comments from the public.
Do we have anyone from the public who would like to speak for or against? You may come at this time, state your name again.
Still Matt Moore. I want to be in full support of this. I think, you know, what Elena said right at the end of her comments is like, these were common in historic towns. People used to do them all the time where, I don't know, I haven't read this ordinance in about 10 years. I don't know, does the ordinance state, you know, what kind of relationship, family members and all that? So I don't know why we do that. Why, you know, you can't lease it out to a student. You know, is the city gonna come and, you know, do a DNA check or, you know, figure out if you're there? But why can't we? And it would be great if y'all would, if anybody's interested, have a discussion on why we don't take something like this and take it out of the requirement for it to come for a public hearing and just make it by right. You know, you meet the criteria, you know, you have the setbacks, the impervious cover, you have a right to do that. It's not part of the
I thought at one time the ordinance said it was one person unrelated by blood or marriage, so
yeah.
that would cover that anyway.
I don't know what the ordinance says, but in the way the ordinance is set up now, it has to come in front of y'all. So it's a discretionary decision. Y'all can say, yes, we approve it, or no, we don't, based on who knows what. You know, it's just a discretionary decision. But why not, I mean, or just maybe you can express why you don't think that should be a by right thing. It's like, I have a big enough lot, I have a house, I can make it fit. I mean, why can't I just do it without, you know, coming to the commission and council and doing it? Because you could take that same building and you could attach it to your house, and that would be legal, but if you want to take it and set it over there, you got to come ask permission. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't really understand. I mean, used to it was legal, I guess, if all the other houses in there had them. And at some point, they made it illegal, and I never understood that, so maybe y'all can ask that question. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
All
Moore.
right, thank you.
Elena, you said that, question for you, sorry. You just said that a family member has to live in it or a second-degree family member. Is that correct in our ordinances?
Yes, it has to either be a staff member of the property, so a caretaker, or a family member to the second degree. So, you know, parent, child, brother, sister, mother-in-law, things of that sort. Now, for the main house, we have a no more than 2 unrelated restriction, but for accessory apartments, they have to be, you know, either, again, employee, staff, or directly related to the resident of the main home.
Okay, thank you. Good to know.
I want to see if anyone else has any comments.
Anyone else have any to speak for or against?
I make a motion that we accept this as presented.
I second.
It's been moved and second that we approve this special use permit. All of those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And so ordered. Go to a public hearing on consider approval of a zone change for PD Plan Development District to R4 multifamily for approximately 3 acres, being Lot 5 and 6, Block B of the Creek Bend subdivision, Unit 2, generally located at the southeast corner of South Steen Drive and Creek Bend Boulevard. This request was submitted by Mario Wesley, case file ZON 2022-03.
Thank you, Chairman. Elena Helton, City Planner. As stated, this request is a zone change from PD Plan Development to R4 multifamily. The property is approximately 3 acres. And the purpose of the zone change is to entitle the property for future residential development. Planned developments are unique from other zoning districts in that they have a specific plan for that property. And so initially, they'll have approval of a general concept that'll identify certain land uses that are permitted within that district. And then later on, they'll get approval of a development plan that'll include a layout of roadways, buildings, where those specific uses will be located on the property. And then once that gets approved, they have so much time to actually get site plan approval and construct whatever it is that they're proposing to build. And if they don't construct it within that time, the PD expires. And so if you don't build it, you lose that entitlement. This property was first established as a planned development in 1984 for high-density residential. It included apartments, patio homes, duplexes, and sorority houses. There are 5 sorority houses built on the north side of the subdivision. And then again, in 1989, the PD was amended to allow for fraternity houses on that south side of the PD. And so there was one fraternity home that was built, but the rest of the property did not get developed. And then it was amended again in 2005 and again in 2010 to allow for duplexes. And those are those 2 duplexes that you see on the north side of the subdivision. There hasn't been any development activity since then, so there's been at least 12 years. And part of that is the development that was initially proposed. There's been a lot of change over time as far as how the city has grown, our population, our demographics, and essentially the market for fraternity houses isn't what it used to be. And so the applicant would like to develop this property as a duplex or some other residential development. In order to do that, they need to either amend the development plan or change the zoning to something altogether, which is the same process. So it's still a zoning process, whether you have a specific plan that you're taking forward for approval or you're asking for a change in use. This is the same exact process, but the R4 zoning does provide some flexibility as far as the timing of that development and how that development is laid out on the property. And so just to give a little bit of background about the PD and what was initially approved and what's being requested today. So the future land use plan, this is the comprehensive plan's graphic that shows how property should grow and be developed over time. This area is designated as multifamily residential. So the request is in line with the future land use plan and comprehensive plan. And these are just some images from that subdivision. So again, this property does take direct access to Creek Bend Boulevard and South Steen Drive. The surrounding properties are largely undeveloped except for a fraternity house on the south side, 5 sorority houses on the north side along with a couple of duplexes, but the remaining portion of the development is primarily vacant and undeveloped. These are, again, just some images of some of the residential product that's already there. So this is a map of the notification area. And so just to reiterate, we send written letters to all the property owners within 200 feet. And each property owner gets a response form that they can complete and send back. And on that response form, they can note whether they're in support or in opposition, provide any comments, their contact information. And then we submit that as part of the packet for the Planning and Zoning Commission. And the reason that we do that is because the 200-foot buffer is significant in that if staff receives written opposition from property owners that make up 20% of that buffer area, then City Council can still approve the request, but they have to do so by supermajority. And so that's why it's important to delineate the responses that we get from the 200-foot buffer versus those outside. We also send courtesy postcards to people within 500 feet. So we notify a lot more people than that, but they don't get the same response form. They get a postcard identifying the request. Hey, we're having a public hearing on this date. Here's the location and time. And we invite them to attend the meeting and provide any public comment. And so of the 200-foot buffer, we did receive one letter in favor of the request. And we realized that wasn't in the packet, but we put a copy of it at your place. And that was from the property owner to the east of that commercial property. It's actually a real estate office. And so we did receive a written letter from that property owner in support of the request. And then we also received a written letter in opposition from one of the neighbors within the Northgate subdivision to the south that are within that 200-foot buffer. And we received that today, but we made copies, and I have those for you. We also received opposition from neighbors, other neighbors within that subdivision, but they were outside the 200-foot buffer. But I have that information as well, so I'm gonna pass that out now.
Thank you, Elena.
You have the other letter? I didn't get the other, original. You said there was two?
There was one written in favor. We went ahead and put it in your packet. And so when you see the notification map, if you turn the next page, you should see a copy of the letter for approval. And the one I just handed you, we received just a few minutes ago. That one is in opposition from one of the neighbors who live in that Northgate subdivision to the south. I also gave you a copy of a signature page from various other property owners within that subdivision. And we received, I think it was 6 total comments in opposition from the Northgate subdivision residents that were outside of the 200-foot buffer. And so there's a number of them here to speak tonight. We'll have a public hearing and allow them to address the commission. Some of the specific concerns stated, and you'll see some of those in Ms. Canning's letter, refer to concerns that are normally associated with any kind of residential density development, traffic, noise, privacy, things of that sort. So we did want to clarify that the property to the south that's located between the subject property and the subdivision, excuse me, it's a large tract that's zoned ag, and there's a creek that runs through that property and connects to a larger creek down to the south. And so that property isn't entitled for any type of development, and that's not part of this request. And so any traffic is going to be towards Steen Drive and Creek Bend Boulevard. There won't be any extension or expansion of that use south as you move to that residential subdivision. So we do want to clarify that, because I think that was a point of confusion about, is this actually moving south? Are we going to have new traffic and access like through our neighborhood? And so all this is going to be generated and funneled through that Creek Bend subdivision, so there won't be any additions to the south. And if multifamily is developed, they'll actually have to provide a 6-foot screening fence, 15-foot landscape buffer, so there will be some additional protections in place to help screen any offensive nuisances or anything like that from that neighborhood. And so with that, we did want to conclude our presentation, open it up for questions from the commission. I know we have some people in attendance who would like to speak, and so more than happy to come back and answer questions after that. And I believe our city engineer is in attendance as well, if you have any questions, as well as our applicant. So with that, I'll open it up for questions from the commission. I know I went through that fairly quickly, so, okay.
Familiar with the place.
All right, Elena, this is probably one of those zone changes that would require us to have an open discussion before all these applicants come in. Is that correct? Did we decide that?
So we can go and open it for comments and discussion from the commission now, and then we can open it for the public hearing, hear those comments, close the public hearing, and then you'll have the opportunity to ask additional questions.
Great.
And then before we have discussion and deliberation, we'll get a motion in a second, and then we'll have the deliberation.
Okay.
All right? Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions from the sister?
All right, then I'll step aside and we can get comments from the public.
Elena, one question. Was there a community neighborhood meeting?
Not for this request, because the PD is already zoned and approved for high-density residential, and so the request and use is actually similar. It's just that with the straight zone change, there's no development plan that goes along with it. So that, in our mind, it's multifamily to multifamily, except for the lack of a specific plan that gets approved by council. So we didn't have a neighborhood meeting.
But it could possibly be one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we always throw that out there, and we offer it as a opportunity to get that feedback ahead of time, but it's, we can't require, we're not requiring it. Okay.
Okay, we ready for our public hearing on this, request for a zone change?
My name is Travis Davis. I'm a resident of Northgate subdivision. The written response form that you received that was outside of the 200-foot buffer, that was mine. I didn't realize that that was specifically for within the 200-foot buffer, but my wife and I's property there may be some discrepancy on how it's measured, but I would say it's about 300, 320 feet, corner to corner from our property there. So my opposition is primarily a concern of the clarity that comes with the amendments from the PDs. I would be in support of the current PDs and the future amendment of those PDs to be a similar growth within the development, because I think there's a certain level of clarity that comes with those specific amendments to allow these developments that fit with what's currently there. I would be concerned with changing it to R4 just because of the broad nature of flexibility of developments that could then come in. For me, the spot zoning is a concern. There's not any existing R4 right there around it. There is R4 to the northwest. And my concern would be that if that becomes R4, that's going to begin to spread and change all of that PD away from what its intended purpose was. And if it varies from what its intended purpose was, there are some developments within R4 that could devalue the existing developments that are there. And so that would be my primary concern. I think the existing PD has been adequate for a long time. It already provides the flexibility of unique amendments if there are specific developments that don't meet the criteria of that PD that someone wants to bring in, and there's mechanisms to do that you don't have with the R4. So I would be in support of the current PD being amended if there were amendment that needed to be made, but not just a blanket change to R4.
So for clarity, you're Jason Robertson?
No, Travis Davis.
Okay,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Do we have anything on that?
I think that Mr. Mills has got the rest of them here.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the forms that we received from the residents outside of the buffer, we didn't include copies of those. We talked about them in the staff report, we talked about them here, and I do have a list of those names, but we don't put them in the packet because they are outside of that 200-foot buffer, but we always let the commission know, hey, we got these additional comments from,
And I appreciate the clarity on that. I think it's good that you guys use the people within that 200-foot buffer to develop whether or not you need a supermajority. So that's kind of what I wanted to clarify. I didn't realize that's what those were for. So, it's not to be taken into consideration for that. We are outside of that buffer. I think we are within the 500-foot. We didn't get notified, so we didn't find out about this until one of our neighbors brought it to our attention 2 or 3 days ago. So we were kind of behind the ball on knowing that this was coming up, being able to understand the complexities of. I appreciate you, Elena, explaining the PD too. That was the first. That was one of my primary questions: is exactly what does the PD allow for? Because it seems to me like there's already a lot of flexibility in there that development could continue to be built out as it was intended without having to change the zoning. With some of the concerns that come with the flexibility within an R4 that may not be warranted in that particular location.
Thank you, sir.
So,
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Others like to come speak for or against?
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
My name is Mabel Cannings. I am a resident of the Northgate subdivision. In fact, I'm a 4-decade resident, and we've always enjoyed the peace and quiet of the area and the ability to sit on our own back porches and watch the deer and the antelope roam and squirrels and possums and everything else. And of course, when we received this notice, fear jumped into our hearts because we felt that there was the potential to add, a crime element, and I don't want to be watching out my back door for folk climbing the fences and going on. And so that was a concern. And of course, I was concerned that the current fraternity that is there operated under the PD classification all of this time, and they were able to build nice homes for the student housing, but they were built very nice. And I was just wondering what this contractor has in mind going to the R4. And so that was a main concern, that they would be trying to introduce perhaps greater, lower quality and more high density properties into the community, which would be concern of mine. I would yield to anyone else that wanted to speak on this, but that's my main concern. Now, I will note that the fraternity, the proposed 200 feet, it's going to be like 40% closer to us than the fraternity, okay? And so that means it's going to be more noise. There are a lot of senior citizens, like myself, my mom, and others, and working people who actually have to get up and go to work. And the noise has been a big factor in our community. And so the closer that property is, the less effect that buffer is going to have in protecting us from that noise pollution. And so for the most part, the other gentleman has addressed the concerns that I had, but I just wanted to say I'm opposed to it if it's going to mean it's going to be a lot of high density and large sprawling apartment complexes right behind my back door. Okay? Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Ms.
All right.
Cannings.
Thank you, Ms. Cannons. Hello.
Commissioners, my name is Daniel Weaver,
Right.
and I lived out at North Gate subdivision for 50 years, 216 North Gate Drive. I am outside the 200 feet buffer, but I'm concerned with my neighborhood. I'm a neighborhood watch coordinator, so I oppose this change from to R4 multifamily. We've had a nice neighborhood for 50 years at least, and sometimes we get a little noise from the sorority houses that kind of just seem like in our community or neighborhood. Could be the weather. I've had to get some units out sometime to quieten them down, and I oppose this because of maybe increased noise, crime, and probably lower property values eventually. So anyway, I'm in opposition of this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
Anyone else like to speak for or against this zone change? Commissioners?
Question.
Elena is coming back.
Yes. So how many people fall within the 200
200.
feet? There's
It,
not much residential to begin with in the circle there, except Northgate.
yes, so it was actually 12 different property owners. And then within the 500-foot buffer, we didn't really see a large increase except for that Northgate area because the lots are much smaller, so you catch more lots, so there's more property owners. That was where we saw the increase in the number of notices. And so there were substantially more people that were notified beyond the 2 stars that you see in this map, in this map here. And so I don't have the exact number
Do we meet
offhand.
that threshold or no?
Oh, so, sorry, so the properties that we received the written opposition for, they don't meet the 20%. To answer your question, I'm sorry, I misunderstood
No,
your
I
initial
didn't ask
question.
it probably correctly, so.
Yes.
Yes, I was, as reason I asked you earlier, that we have a neighborhood meeting that looked like this property would be a good candidate for a neighborhood meeting, that you can talk with the people in the community that live there and talk to the applicant and see if they can get some of these questions answered, and he can give them some support, some concerns that can be answered about what's going to be built and how he can avoid going into these community building projects that eventually will cause more problems to the applicants after it's built, because the same people that complain before it's built will be the same people that complain after it's built.
Yes, and we did let the applicant know that there was a neighborhood that was within that buffer area, and so might be beneficial to have that neighborhood meeting. And also the sororities across the street, because they've been active in additional zone changes and amendments to the actual PD. Excuse me. Unfortunately, the applicant didn't take us up on that offer, and I actually don't see him in attendance, and so I was just messaging them to see where they are. But to answer some of the questions about the intent of the property owner, they have stated that they intend to build duplexes on this property. Now, they can say they're going to build duplexes. Once the property is zoned, it's zoned. So essentially, we make our recommendation based on worst-case scenario. Unless they have some sort of development plan that can be tied to the zone change. Whenever we looked at this request, we looked at the adjacent zoning and development. There's actually apartments right next door, and so you see the orange star, that's an apartment complex. There's an apartment complex on the north side of Creek Bend, and the commercial zoning, that purple zoning, is commercial but allows for additional, also allows for multifamily development. So when we looked at the impact of the request for what's entitled there today versus what's, built in the surrounding area, staff didn't anticipate a dramatic impact or increase in density other than what was already permitted there. And so staff was recommending approval. Now, again, whenever we look at this, we look at adjacent zoning, adjacent use, what could, what's the adverse impact. I think it's common to anticipate that increase in density is associated with increase in other things like traffic and crime and privacy and so on and so forth. It's been my experience working in another college town that the fraternity houses do tend to generate more of the nuisance-related issues like noise and traffic, because you have a larger concentration of outdoor activities at one time with groups that are associated with each other versus a lot of individual residents who are living there, but they're coming and going at different times. They're not gathering in large groups and having organized events. So it is a little bit different when you're looking at the character of a fraternity house versus multifamily. And multifamily development does provide some additional protections from the neighborhood because it does require some additional landscaping requirements, additional screening requirements, additional setback requirements based on that adjacent zoning. And so the proposed multifamily actually has some increased benefits to some of the surrounding residential property versus what the PD is entitled for today. So all that, yes, sir.
So the PD, forgive my ignorance, but PD wouldn't if they kept it a PD and the applicant wanted to build the townhomes or whatever, could they still do it under a PD? They just had to submit the plan?
Yes. So what's interesting about, and this came up with another zone change we had a while back, is because it's PD and it's expired, essentially the property isn't entitled for anything. It's kind of in this holding pattern. So any kind of development at all is going to require a zone change process for either an amendment to the PD, like you stated, where they're keeping a PD, but they're just updating the plan and getting reapproval, so to speak, of that plan that was previously approved, or they're changing it to something different altogether. And so the property, in essence, isn't entitled for any new development unless they go through this process to recommend something different.
Right. But they could come forth and recommend a plan that would be specific.
Sure.
And the impacted residents could see exactly what they're going to build as opposed to. hoping they build
Absolutely.
it. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, and the reason people normally don't do that is because oftentimes they haven't spent that money on engineering and architecture in order to lay that plan out, because that takes some upfront investment. And so the zone change doesn't require all of that design work up front. And then sometimes from the design to construction, things change. And so it does tend to be a lengthier, more expensive process. That doesn't mean it's not beneficial, but that's typically one of the reasons why you see that change.
Thank you.
So if they went to planned development continuously, it would still have to be updated for any development to be done on it.
Yes, sir, and we would notify all the same property owners that got notified for this item. We would have a public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission, another one with City Council. It's essentially the same exact process, whether they update the current PD with a new plan or the one we're doing today. Yeah. I think either way, the amendment to the plan would provide some additional assurances. And so that could be the prerogative of the Planning and Zoning Commission to deny the request based on that. Again, staff, looking at what was previously approved versus what's, already entitled for, we didn't see a major impact to density or anything of that nature, but that's an excellent point.
I like your idea that, we update it and, leave it a planned development rather than change the zone. Can we request that be done?
You can make a recommendation to deny the request, or alternatively, you can make a recommendation to to postpone the item or have the applicant look at amending the planned development district. I wish that the applicant was here so we could get their feedback. It's unfortunate that they're not. So I think there's two different options. You can move forward with a recommendation to just flat out deny the zone change. You can make a recommendation to postpone the public hearing to a future date, so we can confer with the applicant about amending their application, or approve the zone change as presented.
If we postpone, will it give time to set up a public hearing where they can gather on it? Is that some-
Neighborhood.
A neighborhood
Meeting.
neighborhood meeting, or is that not warranted in this one?
So whenever you postpone the item, you need to postpone it to a specific date. And so we can postpone it to the first meeting in April, or if we do it, the second meeting in
This is
April,
May.
I'm sorry,
June?
June, thank you very
She meant
much.
next April.
I'm
Let me
living in the
She meant
past.
June.
Um,
She meant June, right?
So, yes, so we could postpone it to the first meeting in June, but now that you're having 2 meetings a month, you could also do the second meeting in June. That would allow more time to have the neighborhood meeting and then re-advertise. Again, the June 1st, I think we do have enough time to have a neighborhood meeting between now and June 1st. And we wouldn't have to do an ad in the paper or resend letters. I think we would just look at who we've already sent letters to and let them know, hey, we're having a neighborhood meeting on this date. And then, again, I think by then we'll have more opportunity even beyond that to connect the property owner with the neighbors and talk that through.
Well, let's ask some of the neighbors, who are the community here. Would that help with a neighborhood meeting?
I've got a couple more questions since you piqued some of my interest, so I wrote a couple things down. Just things that I think are noteworthy for me. First off, if us as citizens had not showed up, there would be no rescheduling, no postponing. So I think it's noteworthy that it matters to us. We're here, he's not here.
Yeah.
I agree with you that I think the neighborhood meeting would have gone a long ways. It's concerning to me that he had the opportunity to have one of those and wasn't willing to. To me, that's indicative of he is intending to do something that he knows we would not approve of. I agree with him. I think we would all be very much in support of having a neighborhood meeting. I agree with what you said. There's a lot of flexibility within the PD that he could currently pursue. And the concern about meeting with engineers and architects is 100% valid. You can easily gauge that with a public neighborhood meeting. I mean, if he has that neighborhood meeting and there's support or not a overly large concern, then there's very little risk, in my opinion, to then go pursue with the architects and the engineers to further that process. One question I did have, if we update the PD, does it have to be updated for each property, or can it be like pushed out till 2025 and then it's up to date?
Planned development districts, again, are unique because they have an expiration date. So from the time, there's your concept plan approval, which is your general land uses that you're going to do. And then from then, you have 2 years to submit your development plan, which is your actual preliminary site plan that shows what it is that you're wanting to do. And from your development plan, you have 3 years to submit your site plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission approves through a public hearing process. And so you do have a couple year lag between initial approval to development to construction. And again, you can just do it for a portion of the PD. You don't have to do it for the entire thing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's an either or. It could be for the whole PD or it could be specifically for a portion.
Correct. Mhm. Now, we have to have an owner application, and there's multiple property owners, and so it's difficult to
So it
do
would
the whole.
probably be one unit, most likely. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
We have received some interest from some of the other property owners in the area about changing it, just because it's kind of stuck and you can't really do anything with it. And so we can have a broader conversation with some of the other property owners as well about what it is that their long-term plans for, maybe just do several at once.
Well, I think it's unfortunate that the applicant didn't show either, because I'm pretty sure he knew that there was some opposition to it that he could have spoken against. So I make a motion to postpone this until the first meeting in June, which I think is June 13th.
That's me, the second Monday?
I think, let me look and see.
You can bring me cupcakes too for my birthday.
Second Monday. Well, okay. Well, you can join us by Zoom.
No, I'll be here.
Okay. Yeah, second Monday of June,
And that was June
13th.
13th, okay. And so the motion would be to postpone the public hearing to June 13th.
And have a neighborhood meeting.
I make a motion. Are you making a motion?
I'm making a
I
motion.
second the motion.
It's been moved and second that we postpone, this zone change until,
June 13th.
June 13th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And so ordered.
All right, thank you. All right, so,
Thank you.
sorry.
Thank you to everyone that came in. Thank you.
Elena, does that include a public, a neighborhood meeting for it to be considered on the next?
Yes,
We'll coordinate a neighborhood meeting, yes.
yes,
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank you.
all right.
All right, Chairman, I think we're ready for the next item.
All right, public hearing, consider approval of a zone change for R2, the single family to R3, two-family for approximately 1.5 acres being lot 1 through 10 of the Budgie Hill addition, generally located at the southeast corner of Nash and Doss Street. This request has been submitted by Rolando Rodriguez, case file ZON 2022-04. Elena.
Thank you, Elena Helton, City Planner. As stated, this property is 1.5 acres of the Burger Hill addition. The request is from R2 single family to R3 two-family. This property is predominantly zoned and developed for single family, for properties that front onto Power Street. The other surrounding property is zoned and developed with multifamily uses. There is elementary school just across the property to the north. The single family in the area is primarily rental, and there is a low-income housing development a little farther down Power Street to the west. So just to give you an idea of the mix of zoning districts and land uses, the applicant is proposing R3, which does allow for duplex development, and that is the intended project development plan. This area is designated as single-family residential on the comprehensive plan future land use map. This single-family land use designation does include duplex. So when you look at the definition of single-family residential in the comprehensive plan, it includes the traditional single-family detached and duplex structures. So the zone change request is in compliance with the comprehensive plan and future land use designation.
As it is today.
Yes, yes. So, and this was the zoning map, so it's zoned single-family today. So bounded by Doff Street on the north and Power Street to the south, and then multifamily on each side. And then this is the future land use plan, which shows generally how the area should be developed over time, which is also single-family. And the way the comprehensive plan defines single-family, it does include duplex. And so it is considered a compatible development pattern with single-family development. These are some site photos taken from various adjacent streets. The one on the left is from Power Street. The one on the right is from Doll Street. Again, it's a vacant, undeveloped subdivision. Across the street to the north, you have a public elementary school. Additionally, on Doff Street to the east and west, you have some single-family rental properties, and these are just some images to give you an idea of the character of the area. This is a church that's right across Nash Street to the west, and there's a parking lot right there. These are some single-family homes to the south. So these are across Power Street. These are your more traditional detached single-family structures, primarily rental. There are a couple of owner-occupied. units. This is an image of the notification map. And so of the letters that were sent out to the property owners within 200 feet, we did receive written opposition letter, and we provided those in your packet. So this is actually one owner, but they own 7 different lots that are within the owner notification area. So these images that we showed you here of those rental properties that are to the east and to the west, that both front Power Street, that particular property owner owns all of those rental properties. And so he is representative of all of those lots. It's still not, it still doesn't meet the 20% threshold, but it is those 3 purple stars to the left and those 4 purple stars to the right of your screen that front on Dolph Street. It's those rental properties right there that he owns. And specifically, his concerns were the change in development pattern, and so changing from single family to a duplex and the desire to maintain that character. That was the only written response. We got a couple of questions, but no other formal opposition or support for the request. Yes, ma'am.
Is that vacant property now?
It is, yes, ma'am. This property is actually, it was platted several years ago, and so the size of the lots is actually more in line with the R3 zoning district. These lots are actually undersized for R2 zoning, so these are more in line with duplex zoning district size, and the other lots in the area are also undersized for your traditional single-family development. And so with that, I believe I don't see the applicant in attendance, and unfortunately, we don't have any way to contact them at hand, but they have stated that they do intend to develop the property with duplexes. The R3 only allows duplexes in single family. It doesn't allow any additional multifamily or any other higher density. With that, I'll close the presentation and open it up for questions from the commission. And the property owner that received the letter from is also not in attendance, but you do have a copy in your packet.
All right, thank you, Elena. Any questions from the commission to Elena? Thank you, Elena. This is a public hearing. So we have anyone here to speak on behalf or against approval of zone change these particular lots?
Sir, you walked in late. Are you here for any specific action? Or you just,
I don't know if y'all already did, I got the zone change I was gonna present.
Mario Wesley is the applicant for the Creek Bend Boulevard zone change that you just took action on.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
We made a motion to postpone it, sir, until the first meeting in June, which would be June 13th.
Was there a reason to postpone?
Yes, there was opposition from the neighborhood around you, and they wanted to give their grievances and opinions, and we listened to them, and we had questions for you, but the docket had moved on. So we're going to postpone it, and then we're going to actually have a neighborhood meeting for them so that they can ask you questions, hopefully.
So that's the policy, anytime both sides aren't here, y'all just postpone?
Mario, do you mind stepping up? Because
Yeah, give us your name.
they can't hear you on the recording.
can we take this right now? Talk, or?
Yeah.
Yes, Mario, I'll follow up with you afterwards. Is that okay? Okay. Let's continue the public hearing for this item,
Yeah.
and then afterwards, I'll follow up and I'll provide clarification on the zone change for Creek Bend.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. We gotta stick to the process
Yep.
here, so
Yeah.
sorry.
Does anybody have any questions on this one?
We have any questions for Elaine? Can open it up for public hearing for a zone change for, from R2 to R3 in the Burgess Hill on, between Nash and Dolph Street. Anyone to speak for or against this zone change? Anyone here to speak for or against? Not, we'll close the public hearing.
Any questions from the commission?
Any questions? We ready to vote on this?
Does anybody want to make a motion?
Have a good day, sir.
Bye-bye, Mr. Bartlett.
Bye, Steve.
Good to see you.
Can get a motion to accept or reject this request on the zone change.
I make a motion to accept it.
We have a second?
It's hard to know what to do when
Yeah,
there's
there's
nobody
nobody
here in
here.
either direction.
Yeah, and, so the letter generally stated the desire to maintain single family. I will say that when you look at the density in this area, what's actually built on the ground for single family, the density per acre is very similar to what's being proposed for duplex zoning. And so staff doesn't see any negative adverse impact or significant increase in density. And typically with this type of new construction, it tends to be a catalyst for improvements to adjacent properties. And so this area does include a lot of older, single-family rental properties that are in need of
Is this across
update
from
and
Brooks
upkeep.
Quinn School?
It is.
Yeah.
And so I think that oftentimes we get concerned from neighbors about zone changes because it does tend to be a catalyst for other improvements, especially in an area that's been stagnant for a while, that hasn't seen a lot of construction. It creates additional investment in, which can actually improve the existing properties. But it does, changes can be a little scary. So just general statement, if that addresses any of the issues or concerns of the commission.
Do we want to have a discussion before this?
What they're planning to do to it, they can't do under the R2?
And no, because R2 only allows for single family. So if the zone change isn't approved, they still have 9 or 10 lots that they can develop as single family. If it's approved, they can develop those 9 lots with duplexes. So,
18 theoretically, could be 18 single family.
yes, well, it's essentially 18 units, still like 9 structures.
Right.
So, yes. So as far as density, there's not going to be any, vertical construction. You're not going to see a significant increase. There will be 1 additional unit per lot. And when you look at these, we also look at close proximity to other community resources. So elementary school, a lot of these properties are occupied by families because of there's a park nearby. And so we do, we do recommend or promote infill in these areas, especially when they're in close proximity to community resources like a park and school and so on and so forth, because a lot of the traffic to these are typically going to be pedestrian-oriented traffic, not vehicular traffic.
This one's difficult.
It is.
But for me, I'm looking at it and saying the lot sizes are small. Townhome development is good for duplexes, for affordability in terms of housing. It does spur on some economic changes within new builds, and it might spur on different types of growth and development for other people to come in and move within that area if it's already a vacant lot. And so I do know that there's opposition from Mr. Cordova, but he does own 7 of the rental homes on there, which I can see why he would be opposed to it. But those are my thoughts and opinions on that. And it is very difficult because nobody is here for us to ask questions and get answers, but let that be known that was
And
how
nothing
I've
has
thinking.
been developed on those lots.
This area has had vacancy issues for a long time. And so we feel that this is an appropriate area for infill development, especially this type of infill development where you're talking about trying to provide affordability for families and things of that nature. And so there's already infrastructure, there's already water, sewer, streets. It's primed for this type of development. And really, duplex is more of a transition zoning. And so it's not as intense as some of the other land uses that are already in close proximity to the area.
Right.
So we find that this will actually be a nice blend with the other existing uses.
All right.
Any more discussion?
Do we need to make another motion?
All right.
Or does anybody want to make a motion?
Well, we have a motion. I think we need a second.
Previous motion.
Yeah,
was
does
made.
anybody
Okay.
want to second it?
I'll second it.
All right.
Okay.
It's been moved and second that we approve this zone change from R2 to R3. All those in favor, let it know by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And so ordered.
All right, the next items on the agenda are items 7A and 7B. These are council decisions on planning and zoning cases. On April 19th, City Council took action on a zone change from PD Plan Development to R1 Single Family for approximately 32 acres of the Timber Springs subdivision. That was denied 2-2. And so if it's not majority vote, it fails. And so that request was denied by council. The other item was approval of a historic overlay for property located at 403 South Shawnee Street, and that was approved. And so any questions about those actions that were taken by city council?
Sure. Elena, can you fill us in on why it was denied for PD to R1?
And Councilman Anderson abstained. So there was a lot of discussion about the reasons why there was opposition for previous proposals versus this one, and the specific issues that were cited for that particular development, and if those were still applicable to what was being proposed last month. And so some of the common concerns that came up for the previous proposal included traffic, density, crime, noise, nuisances, things of that nature. There was also a conversation about waiting till completion of the comprehensive plan to look at what was planned for this area. And so there were a couple of council members that felt that those issues and concerns also applied to this property and didn't see a distinction. And I believe that's kind of a general summary of why the decision was made, because there was a discussion on, are the circumstances different for this development versus the previous one? And some council members felt that it was, and some council members felt that it was not. Is that?
And when you talk about previous, you're talking about for the low-income housing, were they mentioning that?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And now that doesn't preclude the property owner from coming back and amending the development plan. So they can still amend that development plan because it's still zone plan development district. So they can still keep it PD, but amend it to change that plan for something different. It just won't be a straight zone change like what was initially proposed.
Okay. Was there any talk about ordinances?
No, we did talk about the discussion that we had with the Planning and Zoning Commission about development standards and different types of design for subdivisions, and how that was really a citywide issue, and that we're looking for some of those recommendations to come out of the comprehensive plan, but that we didn't want to, the applicant didn't want to miss out on an opportunity to provide some additional infill, and this was something that was a desire of the adjacent neighborhood. And so that's why they were moving forward with their request, and that's why they decided to move forward and go ahead and take action on it.
Okay. And this is a question also, Elena, on ordinances, but I know this is city council's going to have to take motion on it and approve them, but if we're waiting for DTJ to actually make or suggest things that we can update since the 90s, is there anything that we can do to get a head start so that we can start looking at things like that? Because, you know, something that Matt Moore had mentioned earlier was something about keeping trees. Now, there's always, you drive down Post Oak in Houston, and they're beautiful post oak trees that are there. They're scenic. They give you a sense of wonder when you drive through. River Oaks is another community that keeps those old trees in Houston. And so things like that. We have ornamental trees. You know, by no means am I going to say that this is about a tree hugging opportunity. And there are crazy things that happen, like in Austin, to move a tree, it's $300,000 because you're moving it from downtown to another place. So those people that can afford it will afford it. And then, but to his point, I do think that beautification standards and things like that should be looked at. So the question again remains, you know, what can we do to get a jump start on looking and moving forward with those before it may be too late to look at it? Yes.
I developed some in Austin, and the impervious cover restrictions in Austin are very strict.
Yes.
And so that helps from the beauty side of it.
Yep.
Do we have impervious cover restrictions here? I don't.
No, but we do, what our development standards refer to are drainage. If you meet a certain impervious cover threshold. So if you have impervious cover, meaning buildings, concrete, drives that exceed a certain square footage, then we have on-site detention that kicks in, but there's no maximum. It's essentially like, depending on how much you build, you're gonna have to offset that with some on-site detention, but there's no cap on that as long as you can manage it.
So in Austin, surrounding area, I mean, you can only build, I think, like on a quarter of the lot to protect the
To protect the
natural
trees.
the natural landscape,
Yeah.
So,
I mean, those are things that we don't think about in short-term future, like short-term wise, but 100 years down the road, I mean, the neighborhood I live on in Regay it used to be a slaughterhouse in pasture land and no trees at all. And one of the most beautiful things about Regay are the trees that have grown up. And so, as engaged citizens, we would love to protect that for the beautification standards, but sometimes we don't think about those things and we just do cut everything for development. And it is up to us as commissioners to look at those things and be very cognizant of how we want this city to be for our future, for generations, for your children and everybody else, so.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. And I will say that we do have some landscaping standards that prevent people from just paving everything. So we have street landscaping requirements for street trees that are in the front of your property. If you have a development that exceeds 100 parking spaces or more, you actually have to provide
some.
additional plants within that parking area
Right.
to break up that concrete. And for instance, a new subdivision, there is an assumption that is made on the lot coverage that you're gonna do on that subdivision, depending on the lot size and zoning. And so those assumptions are built into your calculations for your drainage. And so if we start getting permits where they're paving the whole lot, we're gonna say, hey, hold on a minute, that's not what your drainage calculations accounted for, and we'll go through that process again. And so there are some mechanisms in place. We're not as restrict as some other municipalities. Austin tends to ruin it for everyone because they're overly strict, and then the state says, nope, the whole state, you can't do that. So we are restricted in that, and so we do have to be careful. But I don't think that we should not have the conversation. Like now is when
Sure.
we should be having the conversation because
Right.
we're going through this process.
Right.
And I think that there's some things maybe that we can implement sooner rather than later. But some of these things I think are going to need to have a broader conversation with the development community. And what better avenue to do that than through this comprehensive plan process?
Sure.
And so I think the timing, I'd rather not rush it. I'd rather go through that, hear what development community actually wants versus the concerns of the neighborhood. And through this process, we'll formulate that. And so when we bring it to you, we'll have already gone through, a lot of that input from the neighbors, input from the development community, what can and can't be done, what's feasible, not feasible. And so I think we can go ahead and start having those conversations now and putting forward some of those ideas for discussion. I just hate to put the cart before the horse because we're so close.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know that you have had experience in your past too, and with these ordinances, and so definitely bringing your experience to it.
There's lots of ideas.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of things that are some no-brainers, some low-hanging fruit that we could go ahead and move forward with that would make sense, that I think everybody would appreciate. Like, for instance, we don't have an ordinance that allows for a conservation-style design where you're allowing people to concentrate density in a certain area to preserve natural features on a property. And so there's no flexibility there. And so
Yeah.
that's one thing that I think would be very easy to move forward and everyone would enjoy because you're still getting the same number of lots per acreage, but you're creating some spaces where you're protecting areas that wouldn't otherwise
Would
be
love to talk about
protected.
that stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. Okay.
All right, so the last item, and I'm going to provide some clarification for Mr. Wesley. Discussion on possible action and future items. So we will be having a meeting on the 23rd for a potential zone change request. And for the record, and I'm going to try to summarize this, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we decided to postpone the public hearing for the request on Creek Bend Boulevard because there was so much opposition of the request, specifically with the flexibility of what is allowed under R4 zoning district, and so that the desire to maintain the current PD plan development and to just change the plan and provide a development plan to provide some assurances for the neighborhood about what was going to be proposed, and in order to do that, to facilitate for staff to facilitate a neighborhood meeting to get that input from the neighborhood and let the applicant talk more and answer questions about specifically what it is that they're wanting to do.
Correct.
And so we're still going to have the public hearing. We're just going to try to get some of that input from the neighborhood so we can see if there's any changes that can be made to the application or accommodations and see what those are.
Perfect.
So does that sound like?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly it.
And to answer the applicant's question, no, I think if we wouldn't have had any opposition, if everyone was in support, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And so it's just one of those things that rather than deny it outright, let's see if we can find a middle ground
Right.
and a win-win for the applicant and the neighbors.
Right.
And I think it's also appropriate to have the applicant at this time just make a statement or address the commission, since we're done with the other public hearing items, and this one was scheduled.
Sure.
So,
Mr. Wesley, would you like to step up?
First of all, I'm sorry for being late. I had a tenant that said that the water was running, and I tried to go over there and make sure the water was off. But,
So give us your name first.
okay, my name is Mario Wesley. And, yeah, I was gonna look at that development over there. And I was gonna ask, I thought the rule was to do the town meeting if it was going from single family to multifamily?
yes, Mario, so we talked about that. So we didn't require a neighborhood meeting for this item because because essentially it's already kind of approved for multifamily. Based on the input we got tonight from the neighborhood and the overwhelming opposition, the Planning and Zoning Commission made the decision to postpone the public hearing till we could have a conversation between the neighborhood and you at a more
So
neutral
you're saying
forum.
it's already multifamily, so the change that we're doing is taking the planned development off of it, or?
Yes, because the PD has had a specific plan, and it's expired. And so you are requesting something that provides more flexibility than what's there today. And so there's no assurances as to what it's actually going to look like, what the density will be, how far away it'll be from the neighbors. And so just getting some additional clarification and,
So, and I was going, well, yeah, I got you. So we just come back next month?
yeah, and I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Wesley.
Thank you,
All right.
thank you.
Matt, did you want to say something before we close out?
Yeah, I'll make it real quick.
Okay.
You know, there's two projects that are being considered. There's the one on Maroney Drive and then the one on the extension of Park Street. Both of those were proposed that are for single family. It would be so awesome if you would get with the DTJ consultants. These guys are rock stars. They're doing a comprehensive plan, but believe me, they can do awesome, residential plans. And maybe we have to pay them some more, but have them go through and imagine how that could be developed with all these, in a more beautiful way. Because, I've laid out a lot of subdivisions, and the way that subdivision gets laid out is you offset it according to the rules, and then you chop up all the lots, and then you build a street, and you figure out how can we get the most lots out of here under the current regulations and minimizing the infrastructure costs. That's what it's about. That's a pure engineers, and, I've been an engineer for 35 years I'd have to do that math, but we are not good at coming up with designs. Designers are good at coming up with designs. And if they could do this, they could set a precedent and an example of how we could build, better urban design. So maybe you could get the city council to cough up some more money and take one of those projects on as a work project, an example of what could be done.
You probably hadn't heard this, but that's a really hot button issue.
What's that?
The whole
More money
comprehensive
for comprehensive
Yeah.
planning and
Well-
design.
Maybe we could fundraise it. We could have a pie bake.
plan. I'm just kidding.
They may do it for free.
Yeah.
I mean, what these guys want to see, they want to see their plans implemented.
Yeah.
They do tons of plans and nothing ever happens.
Yep.
And I know, I've known lots of people that have worked in those kind of firms, and they're just like, oh.
They want to, yeah.
What did we hear from, what was reported in the paper, the three trigger words that they weren't supposed to use, zoning, rezoning, and progressive? It's like,
Well, thank you, Matt.
all right.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank everybody for today. If there's nothing else, there's another part of this meeting that said, it's adjourned.